So all right, got that started. So let me pull up the notes. So the notes for today are going to be, you can find them if you want to, if you go under our classwork tab on our Google Classroom. In our week 1 section, we're looking at the Thursday notes for the human body overview. This is also where I'm going to post the video that I'm recording right now, if you want to come back and take a look at it later. But let's take a look at our overview. All right, so can everybody see my screen? Okay, it says Intro to Human Body Systems on it. That coming through for everybody?
Yes.
All right, awesome. So like I said, the first part of today is going to be talking in very basic details about some of the 11 major body systems that we're going to focus on in this class. So the main ones that we're going to look at over the course of the next 8 weeks is we're going to do a week on the digestive system. That's going to be our first one coming up. Then we're going to talk about the respiratory system and the circulatory system kind of together in 1 week because they go right hand in hand with each other. The next week, we'll go over the nervous system, so how your body responds to outside signals. We'll then talk about the skeletal and muscular systems together, because just like circulatory and respiratory, those two literally coexist right on top of each other. They're how you're structured and how you move around. Towards the end of the term, we'll talk about the urinary and excretory systems. So how do we get rid of all the different various wastes that our body builds up? And then if we have time at the very end of the year, we'll get into our immune system and how we fight infections, and our endocrine and reproductive systems. So how does our body send out signals to enact change? And how do we go through the process of making more of ourselves? Oh, I almost forgot there's the reproductive system right there on the bottom. If only I could count to 11. All those years of school going to waste. So all of these systems work together in order to create us, human beings. You have the muscles sitting on top of the skeleton. You have the nerves, which control our muscles. You have the circulatory, spreading oxygen and nutrients around. You have the respiratory, bringing oxygen into our bodies from the air. You have our digestive, which takes food and turns it into nutrients and energy. And you have our urinary and excretory systems, which get rid of a whole bunch of the waste products that our body builds up. One thing that I want to add before we go any farther is if at any point you have a question, I say something that's confusing, or you want some more clarification about stuff, please do not be afraid to unmute yourself. And even in the middle of me talking, be like, Mr. Stanley, I have a question. Because when I'm doing the screen sharing like this, it's kind of hard for me to see your guys' screens over on the side. And so either put in chat or ask your question out loud, and I'll make sure to answer it when we get to a good point. All right, so like I said, the first week, so next week of this class, we're going to get into the digestive system. So it's basically contained pretty much all in your abdomen right here, with some extra chewy parts up here with your mouth and your throat. But we're going to go through all of these different organs and talk a little bit about what each one does, what it looks like, where it is, and what we use it for. And the main things that we're going to focus on with our digestive system is how do we break down food? how do we then turn that broken down food into nutrients that our bodies need? And how do we get rid of all of the leftover food that we can't absorb or we can't digest? So breakdown, absorption, and excretion are kind of what the digestive system is all about. I like to start with the digestive system because it's one everybody is a little bit familiar with. Everyone knows how to eat. Everyone's been eating literally their whole lives. And we all know like a little bit about that the stomach is there, the intestines are there. We're just going to go over in more detail what exactly each one of those is doing. The circulatory system is made up of our heart in the middle of our body, and then all of the arteries and veins that carry the blood around our body. So not as many structures to talk about in this system, but we're going to go really into detail on how blood moves through the heart, where it comes from, where it goes to, and how our heart and our lungs work together to get oxygen and nutrients into our bloodstreams. So I mentioned the lungs because the respiratory system, which consists of our airway right here, going into our lungs on either side. This is how we actually get the oxygen into our blood. So it's floating all around out there in the air around us. Our respiratory system and our lungs are how we turn that oxygen in from air oxygen to blood oxygen. So we're going to basically just talk about what's the order that air travels through these little structures down here. Nervous system is one of the most complex aspects of the human body. And we're mostly going to focus on our nerve cells, what they look like, how do they pick up information. We're going to talk about our senses. So how do we interpret light that comes in through our eyes and sound vibrations that go in through our ears. And we're going to talk a little bit about the brain. What are the different sections of the brain and how do they help control our behavior, our speech, our sight, stuff like that. The skeletal system, pretty much just like it says, it's your bones. So I'm not going to make you memorize all 206 bones of the human body because you guys are not doctors in training yet. But we are going to talk about some of the major groups of bones. We're going to talk about how they move around each other at joints and what are some of the main types of bones that make up our skeleton and our skeletal system. Right on top of our skeleton is our muscular system. So this includes muscle tissue, not only for the muscles that you think of, like the muscles in your arm or your leg, but also muscles in your heart and your stomach and your veins and other organs like that. So we're going to talk about the different types of muscle, how they work with your bones to create movement, how they pull on your bones, and how muscles work together in pairs in order to extend or contract different sets of muscles and different sets of bones. After that, we'll go into the urinary and excretory systems. So basically, which are made up primarily of our kidneys, which filter your entire body's blood supply every 30 minutes or so. So every 30 minutes, all the blood in your body passes through your kidney, which takes out all of the waste and toxins that are building up and leaves in all of the water and nutrients that need to be there. All that waste that then gets taken out of the kidney down into the bladder where it's stored until it's released. So we'll talk about what exactly is happening inside the kidney that leads to this waste being taken out and gotten rid of. Like I said, we may or may not make it to the endocrine system by the end of the term. It basically just consists of all the different places in your body where hormones are released, and hormones are chemical messengers that cause some sort of reaction to happen in your body, whether that has to do with growth, with maturity, with aggression, or relaxation. A lot of different aspects of your body are controlled by hormones, which are maintained by the endocrine system. Related to that is the reproductive system, which again, we may or may not have time to go into, but if we do, then we'll talk about where sperm and eggs are made, how they're released, and what needs to happen in order for a sperm and an egg to come together in order to create a new growing baby. The immune system is one that I hope we get to talk about, but again, we may run out of time before we get there. And it's essentially how your body fights off diseases, things like parasites, bacteria, and viruses, which we are all doing our very best to avoid and fight off right now. And so if we get time, we'll talk about some of the different cells of the immune system, how they recognize outside foreign material, and how they attack and get rid of those foreign invaders that are trying to get into your body and make you sick. And then the integumentary system is just a fancy word for your skin, which is in fact the largest organ in your body. It covers your entire body. And so this is another one that we might get into if we have time, talk about some of the different layers that make up your skin and your skin cells. But this one probably I have as the least priority. So only if we absolutely fly through all the other stuff will we make it to the integumentary system. So that's kind of just a generalized overview of the different systems that we're going to be looking at in the upcoming weeks and a little bit about what they do. So for each system in the weeks to come, we're essentially going to be delving into what are the structures that make it up and what do those structures do, as well as how do they work together to make sure that everything gets to where it needs to go. All the oxygen or the signals or the nutrients get to where they need to go. So before we jump into the next section on anatomical terms and directions in the human body, any questions about the stuff that we've covered so far? All righty. So the next kind of part of the notes we're going to talk about today has to do with different directions and different kind of general areas of the human body that you might find helpful to know about before we jump into sort of the major organ systems that we'll be talking about in the upcoming weeks. So first, we're going to talk about some of the different body cavities, so some of the different internal areas that scientists have named to know exactly where they're talking about. So the abdominal cavity, unsurprisingly, is in your abdomen. So the area of your body kind of right below where your libs and your lungs are, it contains mostly your digestive system. So your intestines, your stomach, your liver, pancreas, stuff like that. And it's on what's called the ventral side of your body. Ventral meaning towards the front or towards the stomach area. So like this side would be the ventral part of your body, whereas your back, where your shoulder blades are back here, would be what's called the dorsal side of your body. And we'll get to that a little bit later. So in the future, if you hear ventral, think stomach. That's the side that we're talking about. So abdominal cavity, abdomen mostly has digestive stuff inside. The pelvic cavity is a little bit lower. Mostly this is where things like reproductive organs are kept, as well as your bladder is in the pelvic cavity. Also the ends of your large intestine, so the very sort of bottom section of your large intestine where your digestive system ends, that's in the pelvic cavity as well. And as you might imagine, your pelvic cavity is right around your pelvis. So your pelvis is kind of in your lower hip region up here, and your abdomen and abdominal cavity is a little bit higher. But just like your abdominal cavity, your pelvic cavity is also located on the ventral side of your body. So it's considered to be more towards your stomach side. Your spinal cavity, as you may be able to tell from the name, consists of your spine, as well as connecting to the cranial cavity, which is your cranium, your brain, up here on the top. So this is a dorsal body cavity, dorsal meaning like along the back. So if you think of fish and sharks and dolphins, right, they have a dorsal fin, that thing sticking out of the water and jaws. It's called a dorsal fin because it's a fin that's on the dorsal side of their body. It's on their back. So the area that your spine is in is the spinal cavity. The area that your brain is in is the cranial cavity. Let me think. Cranial cavity just protects the brain, which obviously is an extremely important thing to protect. So we have a lot of really thick plates that make up our cranial cavity right here. And right at the bottom of it, this little hole is where that spinal cavity comes up and connects to. So this is like looking down straight onto somebody's brain. If you took the brain out, you'd see this hole down here where their spine connects. So your chest, in scientific terms, is known as your thoracic cavity. And so your ribs, your sternum, your lungs, and your heart all are in this upper thoracic cavity up here. You don't need to know about these pleural cavity and mediastinum. That's not as important. Just thoracic means chest, the first part of your torso up here on the top. And just like with your abdomen on the bottom, this is a ventral body cavity. So this is towards your front, towards your stomach. So it is ventrally located. So those are sort of the major anatomical regions of the body in terms of different cavities. You have your thoracic cavity up at the top, your abdominal cavity kind of in the middle, your pelvic cavity at the bottom of your torso, and then you have your spinal cavity running along your dorsal side on the back, and your cranial cavity sitting right up here on top. So the final thing that I wanted to go over with you guys today are the directional terms. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this class, if you just say up, down, left, or right, that isn't very clear from an anatomical standpoint. When scientists or doctors are talking to each other, they want to know exactly where on the body you are talking about. So these directional terms that we're going to go over help to determine, okay, when you say dorsal, that means along the back. No matter which way somebody's flipped, their dorsal side is always their back, along the back side. So we're pinpointing different areas on the body, no matter which way that the body is facing or shaped. Like I said, we've already talked about a couple of these, with ventral being your tummy side, your front side, and dorsal being your back, your spine side. So we've got ventral, the front side, and dorsal being on the back side. Some other opposites are superior and inferior. And this is used to describe when similar structures are above or below one another. So this does not mean that one structure is better than the other one, which is what superior and inferior mean in kind of common everyday English. It means better and worse. In anatomy and in scientific terms, superior just means that it's above and inferior means it's below. So, for example, in your heart, right here in the middle, you have one major vein that goes into your heart from the bottom of your body and one major vein that goes into your heart from the top of your body. So the vein that goes in from the top of your body is called the superior vena cava, and the vein that goes in from the bottom of your body to your heart is called the inferior vena cava. Again, does not mean that one is bigger or smaller or better or worse than another, just means that one's on top and one's underneath. So we have ventral, front side, dorsal, back side, superior, above, inferior, below. Some other opposites are lateral, meaning more towards the outside of the body, and medial, meaning more towards the middle of the body. So for example, if I hold my hand out like this, my thumb is pointing towards the more medial area because that's going closer to my midline, whereas my pinky finger is pointing more laterally. It's pointing more towards the outside of my body. So a lot of times you hear this used to describe bones or muscles or ligaments. It just is talking about which one is more close to the middle and which one is more close to the outside. We can also describe where things are in terms of being farther away or closer to the middle of the body with distal, meaning like distant, far away, and proximal, meaning closer in. So this is used a lot when you're talking about bones, where you have like your arm bone, your humerus right here, where the distal end of your humerus would be at your elbow, because this is farther away from your body than the proximal end of your humerus, which would be at your shoulder. And so it's similar to lateral and collateral, or lateral and medial, excuse me, but is used a lot more for when you're talking about different areas of bones, which one is the closer side of the bone to the middle of the body, and which one is the farther away side from the body. Oh, I think we made it to the end of the notes there. Yep, we did. Okay, so just to review, when we're talking about kind of major ways of describing where something is on the human body, we have the ventral side on the stomach and the dorsal side along the back. This is also sometimes called the anterior side. So anterior is another way of saying more towards the front, and posterior is another way of saying more towards the back. Usually this is used when you're describing muscles that are kind of on top of one another, you can say this muscle is more anteriorly located, whereas this muscle maybe is more posteriorly located. All right, so, ooh, good question, Brenda. I'll bring that up when we get there. So our other opposites, when we were talking about above, meaning more towards the head on the body, and below, meaning more towards the feet, was superior and inferior. And so superior meaning more towards the head side, the top side, and inferior meaning more towards the bottom side, the feet side. Lateral and medial can refer to more towards the lateral being more towards the sides, like the outside of the body. So like your shoulders would be more lateral, whereas your collarbones and your neck would be more medial. So to Brenda's point, yes, different parts of the knee can be more lateral and can be more medial. So a really good example is the ligaments that make up the knee. There's 4 different ligaments, 2 on the inside of the knee and 2 that go on the outside of the knee. You've probably heard of some of them before. One of the ones on the inside of the knee is your ACL, your anterior cruciate ligament. And one of the ones on the outside of your knee is your MCL, your mediate cruciate ligament, or your medial collateral ligament, excuse me. So on your knee, the ligament that's more close to the middle of your body, hold on, let me bring this back up. The ligament that's closer to the inside of the knee is called the lateral collateral ligament, the LCL. And the ligament that is on the outside of the knee over on the lateral or the medial, excuse me. See, even I, who've been teaching this for a couple of years, still get confused with my terms. So what I just said was wrong, as you may have noticed and looked at this picture. The inside part of your knee is the medial collateral ligament, the MCL. So this stretches around your kind of inner thigh, inner knee area. The outside ligament on your knee is your LCL, your lateral collateral ligament. Hold on, I think I can write on this. Oh, I can. So we have our LCL over here and our MCL over here. They're both called the collateral ligament, but the outside one is the lateral collateral ligament. The inside one is the medial collateral ligament. Additionally, oh, I did not realize that stays on there. Your knee can also be more distal. So if you're talking about your thigh area compared to your thigh and your femur, which runs right here, your knee would be the more distal end of it. Whereas if you're talking about your tibia and fibula down here in the bottom, this big guy and this little guy, the knee would be the more proximal area because that is closer to the midline, or kind of like the center area of your body. So medial is closer to the center. Lateral is closer to the outside. Distal means further away from some point, usually the torso. Proximal means closer in, more close to the torso. All right, great question, Brenda. Thank you for that. That's kind of the main stuff that I wanted to go over today about the human body. Not anything too in-depth, too specific, but just give you guys a little kind of introductory, a little teaser for some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about in the weeks to come. So you may hear me refer to organs being more proximal or more distal or lateral compared to other ones, or more ventral versus more dorsal. And that's what I'm talking about, just trying to give you guys a way to kind of pinpoint where they are in relation to the other stuff on the human body. All right. So with that, does anybody have any questions about some of the stuff that we just covered? The different cavities, the different anatomical terms, anything like that that you weren't really sure about and was a little confusing?
Yep.
Right. So before we leave off, I just want to remind you guys that if you have not done it already, there is an assignment posted for today on our Google Classroom. Luckily, it's a pretty simple one. It's a basic syllabus quiz, and our syllabus is posted right up here at the top of the classwork section of our Google Classroom. So use the syllabus that I have posted here to answer the questions on the syllabus quiz and turn that in, and you'll be able to get your grade for that. So we're holding off on doing any sort of major anatomy work or anything until we get into the digestive system next week. So just wanted to bring that up as a reminder to get that finished tonight if you haven't done it already. It should take you literally about 3.5 minutes to breeze through.
Did mine show up as being done?
What was that, Matt?
Did mine show up as being done?
I believe so. I can go double check on that
I just wanted to
a little bit.
double check. I just wanted to double check.
Sure. And Matt, I know that you're in kind of a weird situation since you're in my IPC class and my anatomy class. If you wouldn't mind doing the syllabus quiz for both, even though I know it's the same thing twice, but just so that I can make sure that you have credit for it in both classes and I don't forget to give you credit in one class but not the other class. I would.
Cool. Will do. Sounds good.
All right, awesome. Well, that's all I have for you guys tonight. As a reminder, I'm gonna post the recording of this class up under the notes on Google Classroom if you ever want to jump back in and watch me explain some part of it again. But that's all that I really wanted to cover with y'all today. So I hope you have a good rest of your night and a good rest of your week. And I will see you all in our next Zoom class on Tuesday. Remember, we don't have to do anything on Monday because it's Labor Day. Yes. But I will see you all back here for a class on Tuesday night.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, no problem. Have a good one, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend.